All right, y'all ready? I'm behind, so I got a lot to talk about. That's all good. All right, how this is going to go, I'm going to whiz through the slideshow as fast as possible because I was recently on the Talking Drupal with Martin back there, gentleman and scholar, for inviting me to that. I did a lot of overview over that, so I'm just going to really focus on trying to fill in the gaps. But my name's Andy Marquis. I've been a Drupal. I've been in Drupal for about 16 years, and I've contributed a few modules. The one I'm going to talk about today is kind of my passion project, and hopefully you'll like it as well. But the topic of interest is content modeling with custom fields. Links down there to my Drupal.org profile, LinkedIn, and the module itself. So let's get right into it. Kind of a introduction to how we model content in Drupal today. So currently, a lot of people use paragraphs, typically for like flexible component layouts, things like that. You guys are probably all familiar with that, so I won't get into the weeds on that. Layout Builder, another way, flexible, drag and drop interface for attaching blocks and various things through Layout Builder. And then just blocks straight up like through the theme region is another way. And then, the challenge with all these setups that I found in, my years of doing different projects is that all of these can lead to complex setups and which could ultimately lead to performance issues, fragmented data, often very like unstructured. So depending on what you inherit from some other agency that maybe built something, and you can end up with all sorts of different scenarios here. So like, what about fields? Could we model content model with fields? What are fields? Typically, they're the basic building blocks that we have in Drupal. They always have been a part of Drupal since I was around. I'm in CCK, it was basically what it's called, Content Construction Kit, and they've kind of evolved into, all sorts of different things. Traditionally, they're very, text, image, things, just generic kind of fields that come with core, but like we can do more. What are components? How do, fields mix into that? Components typically aren't probably thought of as being fields, I guess. They're, like a combination of fields, like a title field, image, link, usually comprises a component. And it's usually those fields are attached to some sort of entity like a paragraph block or, within Layout Builder. What about fields as components? Could they be components? Well, in some cases, yes. But, core and contrib modules typically, lack that grouping, that structured data that I personally am after for, something to be a component, because not only are we building something that, can render in a group structured way, but also we want to be able to consume that through APIs. So we can maybe create components like through like a decoupled environment, like a front end. Reusability, fields, they can't really be reused like paragraphs and blocks in that nature. You can't create like this, a field instance and basically just apply it in all these different places. But we can do some things with making field types, the structure, reusable and attach those to different entities. And I'll kind of show you some ideas around that. And then some more field challenges. Again, like the data is typically not structured together. So maybe an example of a field model that is like you're probably familiar with the address module. That's structured data. So it's an address is an address that has street, state, zip code, all that stuff. And it's basically what you see is what you get from an API and from a form structure as well. What's classes? Oh, I'm going to need those. Thank you. And again, the API output, what you'd get from an address is probably what an address structure is what a front end developer that's maybe not familiar with Drupal would expect, like a really, structured data object that you can get. But like when you start looking at combining like a text, link, and image field together, that would normally be like a CTA or something. Those fields aren't together. They don't really go together. And then content authoring experience. When fields aren't grouped together and they don't really, they're only together conceptually, we kind of have to fake it and, place them in like field groups visually, but they're still not structured together. So we use like the field group module and put things in some sort of an order with the content, the consumer in mind as far as how they're going to be presented with form data. But that's still more overhead to add that module. The biggie here, fields equals tables. Every field you create in Drupal equals a table. So from a performance standpoint, it's awful, frankly. Nobody would really build enterprise applications that way. Like if you really start thinking about what you're building and what you need out of something, it's every field as a table adds like a lot of joins. So when you have slow forms, you open up a node form page, and everything's really slow. That's usually the culprit in my experience. And then not only that, but like your inserts, updates, your queries, all that stuff are very slow. Even if you start out with a very small site, doesn't have a lot of content, it can quickly grow to a big site when you have revisioning enabled, because every time you save something in Drupal, save a revision, those field revision tables also get new entries, whether the data changed or not. So you can actually, test that out and look at the database backend and see what's going on with there. So again, performance, multiple tables, increase query complexity, and they slow down sites. So if you have a slow site, like look there first, is my opinion. I think that's, kind of what my main goal is. So the opportunity around some of this is, maybe a field system that groups, related data into component-like structures. Problem with fields generally are like you're creating them with code, and you have very defined schema and properties. So if we could have dynamic schema and property generation and really like allow fields to be really flexible and create custom fields that way, that would be a good thing. API output that makes sense, especially to non-Drupal developers. So like when you're doing like decoupled sites, typically you'll get a front-end developer that doesn't know Drupal and really shouldn't have to if they're just consuming the data. But the way that comes in through APIs like JSON API and GraphQL, it's important. It's important to have structured data, not just for API consumption, but for a lot of different things. Even accessibility makes a difference. Better content authoring experience. So having stuff that goes together in a concise way and more compact form structures. Less overhead, optimized data leads to more scalable site platforms. So the opportunity that we're going to come out with is introducing custom fields. So custom field is my passion project. It's a module. Custom fields have been around for a long time. You can create custom fields. Anybody can create custom fields through Drupal's APIs. They consist of field types, widgets, and formatters. Custom field provides a UI to do that without coding. So first off, you don't have to be a developer to have custom fields now with this module. Take all of that legwork, out of your way. It extends Drupal's field API with what we call a subfield plugin system. So basically, Drupal's fields, consist of a schema and property, generation, and this subfield plugin system basically takes advantage of that, where like every subfield has its own plugin, and then that field type or subfield type would have corresponding widgets and formatters at that level. We can group related data subfields now into a single custom field. So like what used to be something where you'd build like a CTA, like I said, with a text field, image field, and link field, which are all like 3 different tables. Now you can put all of those into one table. So very much more performant, and that's what we're after. Again, schema and properties are dynamic, so you don't have to create things in a custom way with a very predefined structure. You can actually define that through the UI. An example of a custom field, I mean, I mentioned the address module that has a very, focused objective in mind. And I'm not saying, take away from that, because address does things that, are beyond just field structure, but you could create an address field with a custom field module that basically makes up the same form structure. One custom field is one table, many subfields. It's more efficient, minimal configuration. A thought around that is like like I said earlier, every time you create a field, you have a table that corresponds to that field. Also a revision table if you have content moderation. Additionally, you also have configuration files for every one of those fields. You have a storage configuration and you have a field instance configuration. So if you have 10 fields, times that by 2, you have 20 different configuration files. So imagine the overhead and all that, involved there. Scalability, obviously, I mean, with unlimited, potential to attach subfields, into a single table, then it's going to be inherently more scalable. Performance, again, we're eliminating table joins and query complexity, and it's going to be fast. It's going to result in really, faster content loading and saving. Why not just create base fields? So base fields are, something you can define in code, and they get attached to, like the node data table, for instance. They're defined in code. They're like a custom entity or node is typically where you'd see these base fields attached. Think of like the status, promoted, published. Those are base fields, but you can add to those. They're intended to be really more permanent and structural. They're not really built to be modified through the UI. I mean, they can be, but you have challenges around like what you can do with widgets and formatters. You kind of have to probably do some custom work around that if somebody expects something that's not out of the box. Again, they're not configurable via the UI out of the box. I mean, you can do things, but they're not fields. They're not field API fields. So you have limitations there. And just the way they're stored, they're stored, in a single table that's defined for a particular purpose. And so if you're wanting to kind of have really specific group structured data that to consume through an API, that's really not the way to do it. Custom field offers a different way around that, where you can actually group things out in a more desirable way. Here's an example of the table optimization that you can achieve with custom fields. On the left, those would be the ones that are highlighted. Would be 4 tables that would all be kind of merged into a single table with a custom field module. So 4 joins on the left, 1 single query on the right. So that's that. One of the benefits, structured data and forms, like I said earlier, kind of group related data into structured objects, field groupings and forms. Don't need really the field group module with this. So we already have a grouping mechanism through our module. Cleaner API output, both in GraphQL, JSON API, the stuff's already done for you. So if you wanted to create your own custom fields, you would have to actually do stuff to make that data, appear the way I'm going to show you it does, and that's just more work than is necessary. It enhances the content authoring experience, makes forms compact, and specifically we have a flex form layout that basically you can design through the UI, using flex-based model, basically to say, I want this column to be 4, this field to be 4 columns, and this other field to be 8 columns, and lines up just nicely. Normally, you would have to do some custom stuff around that to make that work, and I don't think anybody's ever actually done that on the form layer in Drupal before. So this is something that is nice. Another benefit, the Drupal integrations, again, creating your own field types, it's tough, or it's simple when you just looking at structure, but then when you need to start doing other things, like views, for instance, views support can get a little tough. I mean, think about all that goes into like a date field, for instance. If you have like filtering and sorting and things like that, it's not a simple task to do that, in a custom way, every time. And so we've taken that from you as well. Search API, probably a big question. Do these get indexed? Are they indexable in Search API? Yes, because they are just properties, and Search API basically detects your data property structure, and you can index it. Even we have an entity reference subfield, and even the deep data within those entities are also like indexable through Search API. GraphQL Compose. Anybody do decoupled here at all? Yeah, a little bit. All right. If you do get into decoupled, I highly recommend GraphQL Compose over JSON API because it's like super powerful. The main challenge with GraphQL Compose, though, if you don't have a field that's already like supported with schema, because GraphQL is all about schema, then you have to like define that yourself. So anytime somebody creates their own field, like it's not just going to work. You have to define schema. You have to tell Drupal or GraphQL basically what that data structure looks like. Custom field already does that for every single subfield type, even like complex ones like entity reference. We have a view field, our own version of view field, like the view field modules where you can reference views. You can actually even query those views within GraphQL. So JSON API, it works. It's not ideal not because of our module. It's really kind of the JSON or Drupal. It's the JSON API spec and really how that data works. So I won't get too much into that since none of you really do decoupled anyway, but I can show you a little bit anyway. Then miscellaneous other contrib. AI is like a big hot topic right now. I did a lot of contribution for the AI module version 1.2, which is an alpha. I worked on the AI Translate submodule. So custom field actually integrates with AI Translate. So like if you want to, I use like OpenAI, for instance, for testing, and I think I'll try and do that for you as well. But it'll translate like at the subfield level, like all of your content that way. Somebody mentioned default content. You're talking about that. So it integrates with default content APIs. Entity browser. So if you want to use have the entity browser widget, just to have like consistency with maybe your other field structure. Entity usage. So if you wanted to track like where entity references are used and stuff, so it integrates with that. Feeds. That's a biggie. So migrating data into Drupal. I'm actually going to show you how it works with that, and I've got a sample set up. GraphQL Compose, I mentioned. Link it. It's got its own custom widget, works with link it. So like you can do that. Search API I mentioned, and then field updater service. No, you've never heard of that. That's another module I created. I'll get into what the benefits of that. It's actually super helpful, and I'll kind of show you, where that fits into this. What about multilingual? Kind of mentioned a little bit about that. Custom fields are unique in the sense that the individual subfields can be exposed as translatable properties. So you can check. There's a checkbox that says make this subfield translatable, not just the field, but the actual, properties within those. Then I mentioned artificial intelligence. There's a custom field AI submodule that actually hooks into that and allows the translations to work there. Limitations with everything. There's some sort of limitations. So one is a subfield can only hold a single value. So I get asked this all the time because people want to do multiple entity reference, like a tags field or something like that within a custom field. Can't do that. It's basically, think of it as a single column within a table. So we have to have like single values in custom fields. Although a custom field is a field, so you can have multiple cardinality of an actual field of a custom field. So for instance, think of like field collections from the old days and paragraphs, things like that. You can build those and have multiples of that. And I should have mentioned it can be actually combined with paragraphs when you need more to basically complement paragraphs and do things. We may lack specific widgets and formatters from niche contrib modules too that I think of. I mentioned address and geofield. I mean, those have very specific, kind of use cases and stuff. And we're not trying to like take the place of like something that's really complex. Smart date also by Martin, very like niche case of like what it does with occurring dates, things like that. I mean, we do have date field support and stuff, but if you need stuff like that, maybe, the smart date, for instance, provides, it's a, do that and then just combine it with other custom fields. Simple taxonomy reference may be better with core fields. I mean, for like when you start doing like search faceting, things like that, or you expect like the new Tagify widget, which is, I think, gained some popularity, and you're doing like multiple tags and things like that. Probably better just to use a regular core field maybe for that, just for the user experience of what people expect. But you can have multiple custom fields that have a single taxonomy reference, and you can kind of do some unique things there. So why some of the feedback I've gotten, why developers love it. Advanced tooling. So one of the big challenges with when you're using the field API this way and you have data that gets stored in a field, I mean, it all sounds good until you have data stored in the tables and you go to that field storage screen and like you get that locked notice, you can't change anything, right? So I actually built a service for custom field, and I'll show you how that works. Super simple. There's drush commands for it, and it's interactive, so you don't really have to remember anything. You just like type in the command, and then it prompts you for everything you need, and even provides you an update hook example for your module to like do updates. So we can add and remove columns very easily, and all your data is preserved through that. Fine grained display control. Any of y'all familiar with the fences module? So if like for adding, removing wrappers and doing classes and things like that. So I like the fences module at the field level. I actually have that installed and as well. But we have our own version at the subfield level. So you can actually remove all of the markup or add classes and change the HTML tags if you want to get really specific about making an image, like a figure, and you have all this other stuff that could, fill that, figure tag. So again, accessibility, like it could come into play with that, because when you start, defining like, specific elements and stuff that help with that. The companion module I mentioned, field updater service. This is like something I developed for migrating out of poor architectural models. This is like, it's kind of set up as like a mapping service like Feeds, but in its configuration entity, but it basically has a drush command that does all that batch updating and all that stuff for you. But you can pull in data from paragraphs or multiple other field types on a content type, and it will just like pull it over. So I'll show you how that works. Then the extendable plugin system. So if you don't if there's for whatever reason we don't have a widget formatter or whatever that you need, or you want to just do things different way, you can basically just copy one of the ones we have as a starting point in your own module, and then just extend it away. Pretty easy. And do more with less overhead. You don't need a lot of contrib modules when you have custom field, because it just does a lot of things out of the box. Use cases. Okay, demo time. So how am I on time? All right, good. All right, so I have, let me resize this. All right, so I have the demo Umami installed, and so I wanted to kind of go through some ideas on, I'm going to need my glasses on. Are you guys able to see just? I want to go through some ideas of breaking down maybe how some of what a recipe looks like, and how we could improve things. So I actually went in and kind of duplicated some of the structure in here, and so you'll see something, some stuff in the rendering of this page that'll look like duplicates. But then I'll get into the form structure. I'll add those back in, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like. So This directions, just so you'll see like a directions too. So this is the custom field version, and I just added some classes and stuff so it look familiar. But I see an opportunity like this because like with the recipe, say you might want like maybe pictures that go along with those directions. So like step by step, that would be a cool thing. Some sites offer that. If you were going to do that without what I'm providing here, you'd probably use like paragraphs. Yeah, multi-valued paragraphs. And then what if what if you're doing this for a client and the client said, oh, I also want like maybe a preamble, like a summary above all of that. Well, then you've got like kind of like another field that's built in, and then you have this multi-valued like a child like entity reference revision paragraph, whatever structure that's multi-valued. So you're starting to build all this like hierarchy and unnecessary wrapping. So that was one idea that we could use custom fields for. Another one is ingredients. When we talk about structured data, like this isn't really like the way it's put in, and I'll show you in the form, is not really good for an API to consume, and it's certainly not going to be good for like AI to work with, like if you wanted to generate ingredients or parse things out. So right now I have like some examples of kind of what stuff that I put in, but let me open up the forms on that, and I think I need to add these back in. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me show you what it looks like now, and then we'll just turn off the other ones and put the new structure in. All right, so ingredients, for instance, it's just a free-form text field. Like there's not really any structure to it. I mean, it could be consumed as a list, but that's about it. And then the directions are actually just a blob of stuff here in a body field. So we could do more with that as well. Additionally, you'll notice that there's all these extra field API fields that kind of really probably go together. I mean, in some way, right? Prep time, cooking time, number of servers, difficulty. I mean, this is like just like a chunk of things that could probably go together. So I created some ideas around that, and let me move these into the form display. So these are 3 different custom fields that I created. Let's refresh this. Scroll down. All right, so this is the new details field. I didn't put any like field set around it yet or anything like that to group it out, but these are actually individual subfields, and it basically does the same exact as all 4 of these individual fields up here. I'll show you how we can manipulate that here in a section to make it a little even better. Here's the directions field. So here's our step by steps. And then we can add, I'm going to show you how we can add another more fields to this, like an image, even that it already has data. And then we have ingredients. So we now have like a quantity, unit, and description. So this is really good for structured data and AI. This layout could even maybe be improved too, because make this like a little more compact. So we'll get into the form display settings for these custom fields and kind of show you what's available there. All right, so the details one, first off, when we go into that, it's basically we can just change the wrapper on that, make it nice. And then the directions, we'll do, I guess, the same, just to. And then the ingredients one, we're going to change the field formatter, the form formatter to a flexbox, and we'll go into the settings here, and you can see what fields we have here. I'm just going to do like 4 columns for each, I guess. Actually, let's do 3 for these ones that are just units, and then we'll make the description fill up the gap. And then like there's a stack thing. This is basically just media queries if we want to stack it on smaller displays. Save that. And all right, so now we have our directions in a field set. We have like the details section that groups all those fields in a field set. And then we have our ingredients in a nice flex box layout. So this is like really compact. So that's some of the form stuff. Under the hood of like how these fields are set up, we go into the recipe. So for the directions field, I kind of left that open. I only have like a text field currently, but it's basically just a simple string long field. And then within here, there's some widget settings. So we can change it to a hidden if we want to hide it. If we had multiple fields in a form, we could actually hide those. But we can change the label and then have all sorts of different things. By default, like in all these fields, you can change like where the help text is located, above or below. I mean, so some of the form API stuff that is available in code is actually now available through the UI as well. We can add WYSIWYG features to this field as well. Some of the other fields that we're looking at, so the ingredients has these 4 columns. Now these are all locked and they can't be edited, but I'll show you how we can do that in a minute. But we have different various widgets for all of these, so we can do radios, Slack, whatever. This is going to look a little different than the managed form display that you typically see. I'm actually planning a 4.x version that will actually make this stuff just field settings like you'd normally see in standard Drupal fields, and then the widget stuff will actually be moved to managed form display. But that's kind of how it is right now, and it'll change a little bit for the advantage later. But all of these field types, the widgets and stuff, are based on kind of what we need. And then we have this check empty option. So if you always wanted to require a certain field, like especially if you're consuming it through an API or like through feeds or something like that, and you wanted to make sure that like for some reason if somebody programmatically set a value, but you always need like a certain column to always be filled, then like this check empty thing will basically mean like if I always want the quantity to be part of that data, then and I check this box, then if somebody programmatically sets the value, like it's going to be null completely if it doesn't have this subfield value. Does that make sense? And then from the translations part, and this won't probably make a whole lot of sense. I guess maybe the description will. But so we have the translations field, translation setting at the field level. We can do that, and then you'll notice that each one of these has like a box you can specify to translate. So I can translate the text, but not the other ones, and that'll basically modify the form on those language forms.
So an example there would be like if you had an image that you wanted to be consistent across all languages, but
yeah, but let the other stuff. Yep. So that's how that would work. Some other ways we could, enhance that, the ingredient form would be, adding an entity reference to an actual food. So that's one other thing that, I created a content type for called ingredient, and it also has a custom field. And this one has a few different custom fields. It has measures, which are like common weights that you'd see like in a recipe, like 1 cup, sifted flour, that kind of thing. And then it has nutrition. And so like with nutrition, we have a lot of different columns here, and these are all editable, currently because I haven't pulled in any data yet. But in these settings, we're collecting like calories, protein, fat, things like that. We have really advanced features here. Like, so these are decimal fields, but we can set the precision and scale in the storage settings, but we can also check like whether it's unsigned or not, which is not something that you typically see in core fields. So you can eliminate like negative values being stored. So there's that, and I guess for the ingredient stuff, I wanted to kind of show how easy it is to like use the feeds module and like pull in some data. So I have this XML file that kind of maps up to what we're trying to do here. This is like from the USDA database, and I did a lot of like custom work in a database to like kind of create this. But basically, you can see values in here for like the stuff that we're going to try and import in. And then we have this portions JSON, which is going to be like the weights, the measures I was talking about. And because we're trying to pull it all into like one like node and stuff, so you'll see an array of like JSON data here. But I set up like a feed type called nutrition, and it's using the XML parser, but basically this is a custom field, with all the mappings mapped up, to the XPaths and stuff. So for calories and all that kind of stuff. For the measures things, I basically like Fields has an event subscriber, so I just modified that to where like when stuff gets imported, then it'll convert to an array and I'll set that value there. So we don't currently have any ingredients yet, and I'll let you play around with this, but I mean, Feeds is completely supported. But let's go ahead and show kind of what this looks like real quick, because I think it's important. I'm just going to click import. I've already got that file attached to the feed, and you'll see kind of how this is about, 300 entries or something. And so we have a poor internet connection with all of us sharing, but I mean, that was pretty quick. So 291 ingredient items. I don't know I think that'd probably be slower with regular fields. If we go into the actual data, take a look at what that's stored. So we've got all of these different ingredients here. Let me find one that's like something that actually has maybe measurements and stuff. All right, so we have all our nutrition, and then we have measurements. So if it had multiple, then it would have pulled those in. So like if you're building like a recipe app and stuff, it's like this is the way you'd want to kind of do that. I mean, you'd want to maybe extend this so the recipe content type would reference these foods for nutrition. And so now this is like a very very good way of doing that. So that's feeds, and there's other. How am I doing on time? Getting close. There's other. I'm kind of showing like different I guess these could be called components. I don't know, but you might also have a more traditional component like let's say a frequently asked questions section. So again, normally you would probably build that with paragraphs. You'd have an FAQ list paragraph, and then you'd have like an FAQ item, like child paragraph that's multi-valued, right? That's again, one of those things that's horrible for performance over time. So I created actually created a block that would be an FAQ block, and that looks like this. So you're basically using custom field. We just have a multi-valued question and answer set up. And then, that's really simple data structure. This is one table. It just does all this. And then you can use formatters and stuff like that to actually structure this into like a details list really, really easy. I wanted to show you something actually kind of cool. So this is the AI Translate. I have the custom field AI module enabled. So I don't have a Spanish version of this yet. So I'm going to go ahead and click this link. And this is a little slow because it hits I'm using OpenAI, but it'll hit that and pull back the data and stuff. And people are going to get more into the AI topics, I think, in other sessions. But this is how it's going to work. You'll see how cool it is for a very useful thing for AI, I think. Once this comes back.
While it's running, how do you reference, like in a twig template or something like that? How do you reference a
Same way.
So is it like content, field name, subfield?
The properties. So like in a regular twig template, you're like looking at value.
Yeah. So
These are just the property names.
Okay.
Exactly the same way. Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. So you can do single directory components, all that stuff. You target it by the actual property name. All right. So we have our Spanish version now. We take a look at that. Like, so now everything's translated. That's custom field translations. So not bad, huh? I'm probably running out of time. I really want to show you the field updater service because I think it's pretty cool if you guys don't mind. All right.
I would love to see that because it's sort of like, great, I have all these sites that are, like how the process of updating.
So let me go back into that recipe. So right now with this gluten-free pizza, for instance, we have the prep time, cook time, all that kind of stuff up here. So I have these, 4 fields that are now also as part of a, custom field, but I don't have any data for them. So I have the field updater service module enabled. And then if you go in here to field updaters, we're going to add a field updater. And we'll just call this recipe details, I guess. And then we're going to target the content. And it's going to be the recipe bundle and the target field. So this is going to be the field that we're mapping data to. And that's going to be our details field that contains all those. And then this is going to be just the entity. We're going to get the fields from the actual parent entity, not a reference, but you can actually get into a reference and get the fields off that as an option. If you did that, then you'd see which reference field you want to use, for instance, and then you can do more things, but that's for another day. So save and field mappings. And then, so now we have each one of these fields in our custom field that we want to map to. And then we're going to go into, so this one's the difficulty, and we're going to get the value property out of that. And then cooking time, we're going to get the value property out of that. And number of servings. Most of these all these are going to just be value in this case, but you could map over, for instance, a body field that would have a format, summary, those kind of columns. All right, so we're going to save that. And let me go to my command line. Let me make this big. All right, so we have this ddev or a drush command called fu update. sounds a little bad, but a little. Oh, I did a capital E. Oh, it still worked. All right, so it's going to load the configs, all the configs you have. So we just choose the one that we just created in this case. And then it's going to ask if we want to proceed. We just say yes. And then it's going to go through and map those over. So let me go back to the content. And we can see all of them got mapped. So come on, scroll. And there we go. So all our data is now mapped from those multi-fields into a single, and we can get rid of those other ones. Another thing too is, real quickly, I'm running out of now. The add remove column service, this is huge. So now that we have all those ingredients data in there, there was other things that we're not capturing yet. So we'll do cholesterol. we're not storing that yet. So, what if we want to, but now that we have data in the ingredients field, we can't do that, right? So we have this drush command. This is the alias CF or custom field full. Add column. All right, so we have this is going to basically show you all the custom fields that are available. So we're just going to pick the one that we have, that nutrition. So that's number 5. And we're going to enter the new name. We'll call it cholesterol. And what type of data is it? It's going to be decimal like the others, but these are all the different subfield types we could attach to it. It's asking if it's unsigned. We will say yes. And then precision, we'll just default it to 10. And scale for the decimal, I think it's 3, what we want there. And then, so we're going to just get a prompt that says, do we want to add this? And it's going to go through, now that we have like data, you can actually see this. It actually went through a batch service, the batch process of actually copying all of that data into chunks that exists already. So we didn't lose anything. And then it also, you can see that very well. It gave an example update hook for you to like now put this into your own custom module. So like this is just locally like testing. I add the field that I preserve the data, but like now you can add this update hook to your own custom module and then deploy this and it'll do the same thing. So you can add a column. So what does that look like? Actually, let's look at the actual backend. So all our data is still there. Now we have this new cholesterol field. Real easy, right? So if we wanted to remove that field, it's just as simple. We can remove, whatever. We'll target the same one. And number 5. Yes. And there we go. So it did the same thing, batched up, gave you an sample update hook for that. And if we look back into the backend and refresh this, it is gone. But all your data is there. All right. I wanted to cover more, but magic.
So this might be a bigger question. So do you tokens like in like for meta tag support? Is that already
tokens? Yeah. Yeah, tokens work. I actually have a formatter that supports tokens like Views does. So you can do kind of some interesting things there as well in the display types. Actually, I wanted to like these ingredients are. I set up some displays with those, kind of showcase some of those too. But like, so this is like it's very ugly because this umami theme doesn't like style tables. Let me change the theme to just the Claro, I guess, and refresh this. So the nutrition is actually set up using a flipped table formatter. So you might be familiar with that in Views. So like you could actually create multi-valued custom fields that could be like serve as like a product comparison type thing, for instance. That's what this is. And then this other one down here is just a regular table. But these are both different formatters that are available. And then there's also there's list formatters. So we're using the table flipped right now. We have an inline. We have table flipped HTML list, which is going to be like your ordered and unordered list of items. And then we have this thing called custom template. And custom template offers 2 different options for token replacement. So you have basic tokens, which are just like the straight up values. And then you can use the token module where you can actually use tokens, browse for tokens. I actually built custom element for this token browsing thing. So you could actually adjust the recursion limit in here. So if you wanted to get deep nested tokens, like beyond like 3 levels deep, just while you're doing this, then you could actually change this. And then you can check here if you want global types. Because usually that token browser form element, like it's defined of like what the limit is, and the default is 3. But like especially when you're dealing with like custom fields, like you're gonna get into like probably deeper levels, and especially when you get into entities and stuff. But I can change this to like 4 and go in here, and you can kind of see like where these values. Like nutrition. You can see what you have available here. So you can get the field label, the label, or the value. The label and value is probably confusing. Like these different fields can be put into a list. Like you don't have to have a list field type like you do with core. So you can just make them a select list or radios or whatever, like any field. And so like that's why this is available, because they could be a label or whatever.
Cool. Very cool. Is there any examples or any thought of while migrating from like 7 site to 10 or 11, just like build like kind of like a build tier for migration or custom builds for that 10 or 11 spaces already set up.
Yeah. I mean, it works with Migrate API out of the box. So there's properties. It's actually easier than, Feeds just provides a UI. So, and, Feeds is good for like, if you want to kind of, systematically, pull in new data on cron jobs or whatever. But like Migrate works just out of the box. And like, if you're migrating from like a 7 site, you probably want to maybe do your own custom migrations though, and not the Drupal core stuff. I think it's maybe limited in that regard, because it's just, doesn't know about like this module, or doesn't know maybe like what you want to do with data. I mean, I've done some migrations where like that, for instance, that example where they have the directions in a WYSIWYG, in a body field, like and it's an HTML list. I try to look for patterns like that when I'm working on a client project, and then I'll use like the HTML parser that comes with Migrate and like take that chunk and explode it and put it into an actual structure. Because the important thing is, when you start getting into like GraphQL and stuff, it matters, like what your data structure looks like, because I can show you a little bit of, kind of what that looks like. But like for with GraphQL, like this nutrition stuff, look at how that data is structured. If we were going to put that into like separate field API fields, like that would be like pretty hard to consume, because like, then you'd have kind of like calories, fat, all that kind of stuff at the same level as like your node title and all that kind of stuff. So this is from an API consumption way, is really good. So at the migration level, to your point, like if you can get into a structured way up front, then yeah, do it.
This was like just one of the many steps, not like a catch-all. You're going to still have to do some custom migration.
Typically.
If you're like going from like say paragraphs on 7, and you want to migrate into something like this, you probably have to write like a custom process plugin, if I have to guess, where you can like fetch all the paragraph data, and then how I would do it would probably be to like convert all that to an array, and then you can map to properties right in custom field.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But they're probably, I like this because there's some simplicities, with migrations. Typically, you're doing like entity reference or any sort of reference. Typically, that's 2 different migrations, and then you have to do migration lookups. Yeah. And it just gets complicated. This kind of like,
it just skips out of that. Yeah. Yeah. I had some built-in stuff too. Like if you're using the link subfield, like you don't need the link attributes module. Like that's already built in. So like you can set classes and all that attributes. The view field module, it's not needed for the. I created my own view field version, and then if you're doing the taxonomy entity reference subfield type, I also have a hierarchical select widget for that. So and that's just some custom thing I created. But all this stuff works with multi-values in paragraphs and layout builder. And that's like an important thing because a lot of contrib stuff doesn't work like in a paragraph, like the view field and view reference module. I found that like you can't add multiple values of those, like it breaks. There's something broken and so I originally wanted to maybe kind of integrate with those, but then I was like, well, now I'm depending on someone else's contrib module and I could do it just as good. I mean, and simple for this specific purpose, and that's sometimes the best way. And really, like Drupal's kind of all over the place with like the history around contrib modules. I mean, people come and go, and sometimes you have stuff that hasn't had a commit, for 3 years, but we're still depending on it and stuff. So like this is an opportunity to really maybe consolidate all that into a single space and really limit overhead, and hopefully I get more developers to join in the effort. There's like some really prominent names though that are using it. So Nick actually works with Martin on the Talking Drupal. He's actually now he drank the Kool-Aid. So he likes it. Jacob Rockowitz, web form module maintainer, uses it. The guy that manages Jurgen, I never can get his name right. The ECA module maintainer, he uses it. So there's a lot of usage. I'm really humbled by it, and it's cool. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, guys.